So our next panel, and as I said, Ashley in her presentation gave a really good segue into this next presentation, and it's a presentation that I really think is important for people to hear. And I just really want to emphasize, I've been telling everybody that, make sure you attend this panel because it's so important. Ashley said in her presentation, wrapping up, that it's so important during ratification that all hands are on deck. It's not just the treaty team. It's not just, communications workers. It's everybody. And the role of leadership is really critical. I know in my own community that our chief counselor at the time actually stepped away from negotiations. He was the chief negotiator because he knew that his council was not feeling supportive of the treaty, and he felt that it was important enough that he actually leave the table and go and work with his council and our hereditary leaders, especially to find out if there were any outstanding issues, because the leadership needs to be behind this. People are looking for that in leadership and that kind of confidence. So I want to thank Kim and Clint for joining us. Kim and Clint were leaders of their community during the time of ratification. So I think they carry a really unique story, a really unique perspective on what it's like and what their roles were as leaders in their community as they went through this ratification process. So really glad that you've both joined us. We have an hour for this panel. I'll quickly introduce you both. I think that you're both known to everybody that's around here. Kim Quintiltonut. Kim was former chief, of course, of Tsawwassen First Nation. She is currently their chief administrative officer. All of us know that we maintain that tie to our own communities, and no matter what we're doing, we're still tied in some way to our own communities. Kim has got an amazing background. It's in her bio. She has done so many things for her nation and for First Nations people across the country. She is chancellor for her alumni and provides so much advice to boards, First Nations and non-First Nation boards, in terms of sharing perspectives and helping people to understand the need to include First Nations people and helping to understand our issues. Clint joins us. Clint was Hegus, chief of Tla'amin during the ratification vote that Roy gave us some background on earlier. Clint, I was in your community during the time of the vote, and I saw your leadership and the role that you played and the challenges that you were facing. And it was just such a fine thing to watch in terms of you stepping into that leadership role to do what needed to be done in a community under very difficult circumstances. So really glad that you've joined us today and your willingness to share your story as well. Truly appreciate that. So I flipped a coin and I've got Kim. Kim will present first. So Kim, feel free to add to my introduction, and look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Angela and the Treaty Commission for hosting this very timely forum, and I trust that this morning was fabulous. I'm zooming in from Tsawwassen Treaty Territory. I'm Kim Baird, and my ancestral name is Quintiltonut, and this is a name that comes from my great-great-great-grandfather Quintilim from Tsawwassen. As Angela said, I'm the former chief of Tsawwassen, and I'm currently the chief administrative officer. Val is one of my bosses, which is great revenge for her because she worked for me when I was chief. I'm really happy to share this panel and this topic with Clint. It's really good to see you, my friend, and I'm so happy to see all the experienced people that are participating in today's event. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this experience that everyone brings to the table, and I hope people benefit well from it. So, been asked to speak about the importance of leadership involvement as it relates to a successful ratification. And I just have a few minutes I'm going to spend talking a little bit about my story about my leadership journey at Tsawwassen. And I'm going to start with a story about at the height of our negotiations, I was invited to witness a Yukon First Nation signing ceremony, the Carcross Tagish, just outside of Whitehorse. Our federal negotiator at the time, Tim Kepke, had set it up, and he was pretty smart to have me see what success looked like from another First Nation perspective and to see firsthand their pride in what they had achieved as a community. The chief of the Carcross Tagish was Mark Wedge at the time, And he was just so friendly and generous to share information about his experience and everything else. He had told me that when he was chief, at first he tried to be neutral and not to have a position about treaty to influence the community. And he believed that was why, in part, that their agreement in principle vote failed. So he changed his position and he became a champion of that treaty. And he believes that it helped give the community confidence to pass the agreement. He told me that every treaty vote that he'd witnessed failing up to that point in other communities seemed to have a lack of chief and council support and championship. So I thought that was really helpful and insight that he shared, and it helped me figure out how I was going to conduct my role as chief at Tsawwassen First Nation at the time. And this does tie to my leadership journey at Tsawwassen. When I first started working on Tsawwassen's land claim, I was a college student and I helped set up our land claim research department because I was worried about our socioeconomic conditions that we lived in on our reserve and didn't really understand the root causes of it from colonization, the Indian Act, and those things until a bit later in my life. And when I was in college, I learned about land claims negotiations, the federal comprehensive claims process, and we started gearing up to participate in that process, even though, the federal policy at the time was one claim at a time, and we would have been about 140 years in the queue at the rate negotiations are going. But we were poised at the right time because the treaty process came to be set up right around shortly after we had set up that department. So we were able to join that process the day the commission opened its doors. I also, around that time, got onto our council as a young councillor. And as our negotiations continued, I eventually became chief and chief negotiator. And it became easy to become a champion for the treaty because of the community engagement we had done. We understood the community wanted a better quality of life, and that meant needing a different toolbox than what we had under the Indian Act. So while we were negotiating, we were also trying to proceed with economic development. And we face so much public interference from trying to do something as basic as a condo development. It really underscored our need for independence, and self-governance was the best tool available for that. So at the end of the negotiations, when me and my team of TFN members knew we had gotten the very best deal we could, we all supported the treaty and we were very transparent about our biases. I would also say, though, that I wanted our community to have the opportunity to understand the agreement and to make this decision with eyes wide open. And that meant figuring out how to discuss complex issues in accessible ways. It meant trying to ensure that there are ways to understand dissenting views. And I encourage people to communicate their dissenting views so that our members could hear both sides of the issue and make their own informed decisions. And I think what I'm most proud of is I think around 94% of our voting members participated in that vote and 70% voted in favor of the treaty. That level of engagement was a crazy amount of work to get the community confident enough to vote on that treaty. And I think it was probably more work than the negotiations themselves to get people feeling comfortable. But it was worth it, in my opinion. It was clear to me that our community could not have confidence in the treaty if our leadership didn't have confidence in it and wouldn't be willing to rise to the occasion to do the work to implement it and to become self-governing. Of course, being both chief and chief negotiator was an alignment in itself for our community, so not every community has that situation. I guess, in my view, what the real issue is when our people considered the agreement was whether we were willing to take a leap of faith to trust ourselves that we could do better than the federal government had done for us for well over a century and how it had failed us. even though the treaty was not the perfect model and compromises had to be given, um, it was a tool to become self-governing. And, I'm delighted that we did take that leap of faith, and there's been no turning back. We took that risk, and now we are seeing many benefits because of that. So I'll end my comments here and look forward to Clint's presentation and any questions or discussion we have later. Hi, Chika.
Hi, Chika, Kim. Thank you very much. Great insights and, of course, wise words as always. Feeling those bruises and going through all of that carries its own story, and sometimes it's painful to remember, but as we've been talking about, the pain is worth it in the end, and we've all seen some tremendous gains from it, and most of us have been to Tsawwassen and seen those gains that have come to your community in terms of making your world a different place. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to questions. Clint, let's hear from you, and then we'll go open
Uh,
up for some questions.
Great. Thank you, Kim, and it's great to see you again. I have a very brief hour and a half PowerPoint presentation coming up here, so if you could just settle in and and get ready, it'd be much appreciated. No, just kidding. I just wanted to share one main picture that told such a big story, and wanted to give Roy the credit for this. This was on our effective day slash night. Such a powerful story, and kind of I'll get into it in a bit here. But Ajachaput, my name is Clint Williams, the former Hagus of the Tla'amin Nation. I started out, I guess my part in the treaty process started out in about, oh God, I don't want to start naming dates here. I'm going to date myself. And I think I was on the board of directors for the treaty board back in about 1992 and stayed there for about 6 years, and then ran for council, got a council seat, stayed there for probably close to 10 years, and then became the chief in about 2008 and stayed there till about 2020. So there for the effective date. So the Tla'amin story is quite a difficult one. I remember when we first started out, we were on the brink of, or I can't say we, I should say when I first started out, the nation was in a pretty difficult stage. We were on the brink of third-party management, and we had these treaty negotiations going on alongside the nation that was having a very difficult time from kind of previous leadership, maybe some bad projects, some reports that were not done. The list just goes kind of on. So we had to work our way through some of these beehives to start getting to a better place. And so paralleling the treaty process actually had a benefit. So kind of working through and being on council, I was able to work with the council, and we were able to create a forest company that generated good money for the Tla'amin Nation. So we were kind of able to and work our way, uh, negotiate, work our way out, and pay out some bad debts, and get our noses above water so that we could start thinking about the future. So quite a difficult time. We ended up in a wonderful place, so I don't want to depress you all, but the road was tough, and um, I really thank all the earlier presenters. I thought about pulling a bunch of slides together, and I thought, oh, there's such great presenters ahead of me, and they're going to name all the dates, they're going to name all these processes, and I'm glad I didn't put anything together because it would have been just kind of repeat. But you know, kind of just for today's comments, what I just like to share that from the outside looking in, because I work with the Not So Much Tribal Council now, not employed with the nation, so separate. But the Tla'amin Nation is a member of the Not So Much Tribal Council. So I still do stay somewhat connected. And just kind of looking, as I mentioned, looking from the outside in, just looking at this new climate, it looks so great, like the all the new developments and uh, the reconciliation pieces and all that. But I do realize that a new climate creates new challenges. So, looking at it, and I do wish that we were in this climate, because we're kind of coming through the Stephen Harper and I guess the Gordon Campbell days, a couple of leaders that kind of had gave us some grief back in the day. So just thinking back to uh, uh, some some challenges. One story that I have is the mayor of Paul River, Stuart Elsgaard. We were basically stuck. The federal government did not want to move on some treaty issues, and we were just so frustrated because our table was stuck because the federal government didn't want to move. So we um, talked with the mayor and he says, "Hey, I've got some contacts in Ottawa. You want me to go with you guys?" And so we went around Ottawa, Roy, Stuart, and myself, knocking on doors and talking to the opposition leaders and talking to local papers in the Ottawa area and kind of shaking the bushes just to try to get some movement on some of the issues that where the feds were not moving on. So, just kind of looking at the leadership that the mayor volunteered for, he didn't have to do that. He got criticized, and I think he also he got a lot of respect for that too from some of the great people in the Paul River area. So that's just kind of one opening piece. And one thing that I kind of learned along the way is humility is so important as as we move forward in these negotiations with our successes, with our failures. We have people that show up to these meetings, and some may ask what we think is a really silly question, but we still got to pay that respect and not look down our noses or think we're better than that person because we have this information. It's our job to get that information out there so that people understand and are making informed decisions. So just kind of wanted to flag that important word, humility. And that's what Roy talked about earlier when the when the vote passed in Tla'amin that night was people wanted to go honking around and drumming and singing in the streets. And we just kind of said, no, let's exercise humility here because we don't need to make enemies within. We need to pull these people in and work with them for a brighter future. I think I got tired of hearing myself say those words, a brighter future. I've said those way too many times. Um, so that and one thing that was so very important and it's been mentioned is the lead tables at the time, the willingness to share the information. So the Niska, the Manalv, the Tsawwassen, the Clay, it was so important back in the day to have these discussions. Yeah. And it was difficult because many of the books were really thick and we weren't in the days of PDFs just yet. So meeting and having these discussions was so very important. Um, Also teamwork. I heard teamwork a lot this morning and I agree 100% that that's got to be uh, kind of up front and center, and it's so very important. Having people working together for the benefit of the community um, is such a valuable uh, image to have out there. And don't get me wrong, people are going to have different opinions, whether they support something or not. Um, but it's important that they have the decency to kind of share why they don't support something or they do support something because uh, I also heard in a presentation that leadership's word does carry a lot of weight and value to the community members. Wholeheartedly agree. But when leaders are trying to undermine and put falsehoods out there, that's not good. And living in a small community, those pieces do come back to the leadership table and the negotiating table, and and it's not doing anyone any good. Another another tough piece we had was a number of and I'm not going to name names or anything, but a number of our leaders really were opposed to the treaty process. And when they had the chances, when budgets were being produced, they would want to cut the budget in half or or 2/3 or something, just to make a point because they didn't like some individuals. That was very challenging, and our treaty team was very resilient. So when they were kind of ordered to make these budget cuts, they went away, sharpened their pencil, and came back and worked within some very difficult situations. It kind of makes you wonder how things could have been if people weren't trying to cut others off at the knees. So, like in the end, the only people that will benefit will be the nation as a whole. So, I just kind of wanted to just share that is like you don't have to be holding hands around the campfire singing Kumbaya. You can still disagree, but at the end of the day, you're trying to bring home the best deal for your people because your people are going to be the ones who are going to have to um, decide if they want to vote yes or vote no. Boop, 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 boop. One other, so challenges from within. I kind of mentioned some tough challenges from within the Tla'amin Nation and the old chief and council. And at the end of the day, things did end up they did start working better. So please don't get me wrong and think that it, that it's all misery. We've worked through some pretty ugly processes, and at the end of the day, we were able to come to an agreement and have this vote put in front of the community where it should have been. So that was an internal challenge. An external challenge. We had a regional director that is within the Tla'amin territory. This regional director was going around and kind of filibustering people in some small communities, the land community to be exact. And so we were in a chief and council meeting. I was on council at this time. We were sitting in the council meeting and someone came in and said, "Hey, someone's asking why we're not out at land at this community meeting." Like, community meeting? What are you talking about? And so all our council and the chief, Walter Paul at that time, kind of looked at each other and like, well, it's like, shit, let's go. Let's go attend this meeting. It's about us anyway. So we went out to the Lund School and a lot of shocked faces kind of as our whole chief and council walked in. I think we were about 8 members at that time. And so a lot of people in Lund are friendly to Tla'amin. So we knew it wasn't all of them. So we thought we'd go out there and answer the questions that they had because they were not getting the proper information. And so we went out there and it was silly kind of redneck things, like, you're coming for our house, you're coming for our land, you're gonna kick us out of here, you're not taking my house, you're not taking my land. And so just none of that was anywhere near true. So the questions were not difficult. It was just kind of getting out there and getting in front of those I hate to say it, outsiders, neighbors, just to kind of stomp out those small little fires before they became larger fires. And I think we won a lot of support within the community of Lund, and also I think within our own community because our people were kind of being ridiculed somewhat. So that went a long way, and kind of the really funny twist, and I guess the positive side of the story is that regional director that was kind of creating problems for our negotiating team uh, is the director that came and approached Tla'amin a number of years later and asked for a name for the regional district. So that's why you hear of the Cothet regional district. So I don't know what happened to him. He had an epiphany, or I don't know what he had, or but it was so funny though because somebody who was so kind of against our process approached us to kind of celebrate the Tla'amin history of the traditional territories. So that's why you hear of the Cothet Regional District now. So yeah, I think there's been so much information shared. I don't want to go too deep, but there was one other question I seen in the chat. I seen directed to Roy, and it was have some of those family relationships healed. One of the most touching ones was a grandfather who was very opposed to the treaty process, disown his children and his grandchildren. That was such a sad thing to see. And at the end of the day, they were able to reconcile fairly quickly after. So they were able to talk and kind of uh, mend the fences and carry on with family life. But so there definitely is more than one or two of those stories out there, but that was a positive, and I think that's just kind of a symbol of kind of showing that yes, there will be challenging times, but if we could work our way through them, we'll be better for it at the end. I think I may have rambled on long enough that maybe I'll leave it because I think people wanted to start asking questions, and I think you had a fair bit of time in this segment. Thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Clint, thanks so much for sharing those stories. The external challenges thank you very much for addressing that. We haven't heard very much about it, but I think that that's such an important piece, is to start to create those relationships. And I'm sure we'll hear from my chief counselor, John Jack, when he comes up, about the importance of our treaty and building those new relationships and the kind of new relationship that we've got with our neighbors. John, did you want to comment?
That was one of the original focuses that we had at Hawaiian, was to make sure that we started to recreate those connections. So I think I know which director you're talking about, Clint, because I've met a few of them as time goes by in the local government world. But a good example of how it can go is that I've been the regional district chair in my area since 2017. So it really comes down to where you put your focus, being patient, because sometimes the troublesome people get moved on over time, and so on and so forth. Yeah, this is a really important story to tell. So I'm glad you were able to.
Thanks, John. And yeah, thanks to both Clint and Kim, your personal stories of what you both went through. And I think the courage that's needed of leaders to stand up and to take a stand when things are really difficult. And Kim, I know in our nation, we were always very thankful to Tsawwassen, who was taking the brunt of the media attention and difficult conversations while we were sort of flying under the radar in our supposedly remote areas. So that was very, very helpful to us. You had a lot of engines going. You were communicating widely, not only locally but nationally, on the importance of getting into treaty and finalizing these things. It was a bold move for our nations during those times, as Kim pointed out. These were treaties that people considered compromise. I think that both Kim and Clint have outlined some of the challenges that we had and just in entering treaty at that time. I remember in my community when we had, I mentioned that our chief counselor stepped away to actually work with his council at that time. One of our council members was hugely opposed to the treaty, just didn't see what the benefit was in it. And when I saw that council member stand up at a community meeting within months of that and say, there are great aspects to this agreement, just shows how much even leadership needs to work together with each other to help to create that understanding and support for the treaty. And it takes work. People will have things in their minds about the kind of myths that people talked about this morning as well. So those conversations are worthwhile. Clint?
I forgot to I was giving Roy credit for his photos on the one slide that I shared. I sorry, I forgot to mention what the photos were and why. So obviously the title was effective date, but I just thought it was so symbolic. There we were building our new governance house, and so it wasn't quite complete, and I think it was just about fitting. So we were we thought we'd have the building complete by the time effective date rolled around, and it wasn't. So there was plastic hanging around and wet drywall all over. But the goal was to open this governance house on the effective date. We came up a little short on the construction, but we're still able to have the ceremony in the brand new governance house. And so a big part of the ceremony was that we burnt the Indian Act in the fire pit that's in front of our main entrance at the governance house. So that's what the document that you see in that fire that Roy captured so well is the Indian Act being burnt up. So in in the Tla'amin culture, we make offerings of food and clothes and everything to our ancestors. So it wasn't 100% sarcastic, but it was it is a part of our tradition to make offerings, and it felt very powerful uh, to be able to kind of hand pages out of that Indian Act to the several members of our community that showed up to welcome in the first effective date. So this was kind of waiting for midnight to sign a bunch of documents, and I just thought the pictures are so powerful, and maybe needed a little bit of explanations, but it was something because we have I can't remember how many non-native leaseholders we have, but a good part of them showed up to kind of be there for the midnight I guess I'll call it celebration, the effective date. So very powerful. They witnessed our people being able to kind of take individual pages and throw them into the fire and make their offering. So just wanted to share that little bit. I knew I forgot about it earlier. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Clint. And yeah, I think that happened in a lot of communities, and it was indeed powerful to burn the Indian Act and step into your own house of government immediately following to sign off on the laws that are going to bring you into your future. So thanks for sharing that. That was very powerful, and they're great pictures. Roy, I think you're still online. I wanted to know if you wanted to address the question personally. Clint touched on it as well in terms of the healing going on in the community.
Hello, Angela. Yeah, I am still online. Clint brought us through like an amazing story. The celebration on effective date was so moving. But like, yeah, it was a time of, I believe, the beginning of a coming together. Like I think even for people that were not supportive of the treaty, I think they could relate to burning of an Indian Act, something that was not a good thing for any of us. And I believe there was a good participation in taking pages from that Indian Act and forming a line and people getting a chance to put pages of it into a fire. I think it was the beginning of coming together. And I think Clint mentioned like the fire event. It was more than just the burning of an Indian Act. It was an offering. And it's an offering to all of those that have come before us. And it's a way of paying respects to all of our ancestors in common. So I think it's very fitting that our community came together to do that. I think through all of the differences that we've ever experienced, like times of passing, times of honoring our common elders, I think it's a unique part of our world that brings people together. And I think that was like one good first step in bringing us there. So it was amazing.
Thanks very much, Roy. Yeah, there's lots of healing that needs to be done in our communities. I think that somebody mentioned earlier that some people are under the impression that the treaty should solve all of our problems, and it doesn't. It gives us the tools to help us solve them for ourselves. So, that's really an important message, I think, to bring to our people, that this is going to take time. It took us time to, get away from what we should have been, and it's going to take us time to get back to where we should have been. Kim, I used to quote you extensively from one of your Twitter posts from many years ago, where you said that peeps or tweeps should know, tweeps should know that I've never met a self-governing First Nation leader that wishes that they could go back to the Indian Act. That was something I carry around with me because it's so true and seems to be so obvious, but when you say it, it really, really highlights. Kim, before I go to questions, were you having any reflections or anything you wanted to add before we open up the floor?
Yeah, I just want to say that those riffs, that engaging in community discussion about the way forward, they build on pre-existing riffs because of colonization and the impacts of residential school and colonial governance that's been imposed on our communities. And a lot of people blame the treaty process for these risks, but these risks were already there. And in our case, we're now at a point where we can invest in community healing. We can pay for community supports. We can pay for education investments. We have a toolbox to deal with decolonizing and dealing with those harmful impacts. And it's taken us almost a generation of hard work to get to a point where we can build a toolbox to have useful tools, if you know what I mean. So a lot of people kind of misdirect their anger towards a process instead of the situation we've ended up in, not because of our own doing. So that lack of knowledge about our own kind of circumstances and how we got into them is important, because we weren't taught about, well, at least my age, we weren't taught about that in schools or anything else, and not really understanding why we have the legacies of poverty and lack of infrastructure and scarce resources that our families tend to fight over, all those things. And I think all those things take time to overcome. And like you said, the treaty is a toolbox for that, but it does take time. And some of the things we're measuring are going to take generations. They're not like, oh, by next quarter we will have fixed our education challenges, right? So it's just we have to have a little bit of patience in and managing expectations and all of this, I think.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Kim. Something we always emphasize too is for people to be part of the solution. That if you're having troubles or if you have issues around education or provision of services, help your leadership to understand how it would work better for you, because that's what self-government is all about, is us exercising our voices and being able to help and support making our world a better place. So we have some time. Does anybody have some burning questions for our panel members or want to engage in some discussions? Raise your hand or turn your video on.
I just wanted to mention while we're waiting to see if any hands go up, I remember, I'm not sure if it was her first term, but Chief Rempel, Hagus Rempel in Comox, I remember a few years ago, uh, I was still Hagus at the time, and she invited me over to a session that they were hosting all the regional districts in the area. And so we pulled together a slideshow, and I went over with Mayor Dave Formosa, and we shared a presentation. And, you know, the decolonization was big on the mind back on in those days. And so I think that was in one of my slides in one of my presentations. Oh, sorry. And yeah, Jack was at that presentation. And so where I'm going with this is one of the local area directors said, "Why would you want to decolonize? You should be looking to colonize more." And I was just like, holy crap, did I just hear that? And I'm trying not to like start throwing F-bombs and everything, but I just said, whoa. I said, yeah, there's there's a lot of history that we need to work through, and we're trying to provide brighter futures for our communities. So I'll zip it now. I see a couple of hands up.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Clint. Yeah, it's amazing some of the stories and comments that we've heard over the years, for certain. Patricia, Patty Chips, welcome. Question.
Yes, thank you, Angela. I just like to thank all the panel and all the colleagues sitting on the meeting this morning and this afternoon. I found it extremely informative, and I really appreciate the different insights. So hopefully, with the knowledge that we've gained today, that we can take it back and practice it on our reserves and make sure that we get everything right. So I really appreciate it. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Appreciate that. Sayachat, John.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kim and Clint. I'm wondering if you could talk to like the importance of leadership being involved in making things work, especially in the implementation after ratification. When should you start thinking about succession as well? When should you start thinking about the next generation and the next group of people? It's a bit of a easy one, but I think it should be mentioned just so that we're thinking about all those aspects. Yeah, thanks.
Kind of cut off at the beginning. Was that for me or Kim? Sorry.
Oh, both.
Oh, go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I guess it's you can't ever start too soon, I think. I also think that now that we're almost 16 years in past the effective day, we have a whole generation of people that didn't get the treaty campaign information and don't really know much about it, even though they're living it. And so it's one of those things, though, that like is the like economics of the Tsawwassen Treaty exceeded our wildest expectations, but the people end of things takes so much time and effort, and it needs sustained thinking, whether it be, you know, capacity building, governance development, how your organization might look and grow, like all those things require some strategic thinking and some time set aside to do that. If I have any advice about the implementation end of things is to really preserve that ability for your organization and your leadership to think about those things and to work on those things, because they're the longest to develop in my experience anyways. I think that was the breadth of your question. Am I missing a part of it, John? No? I could go on, but I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Kim. Clint?
I guess the first thing I want to touch on is archiving. You know, the traditional use studies have kind of brought us to, we had to prove who we are, where we were from, and all this, and where we live, and all that lovely stuff. I think the biggest thing, one of the biggest things is archiving that for after the effective date, because I mean, the work has got us to where we were to get to the closing date, but it must be preserved. You know, if we start piecemealing it out, you know, like maybe our rights and title department needs to use a piece or something, you know, you start taking one piece and another piece there, another piece there, someone doesn't return something, now all of a sudden you have incomplete files. So, you know, kind of making sure that you archive. One of the things that Roy touched about too, you know, was archiving your communication materials too. So I believe it was when we had our injunction, we had to prove that we advertised our sessions. And so we're like, well, how did that get advertised? And it was door-to-door flyers were the big thing in our community because there was no Facebook. And so we're like, well, pull that out of the file and we'll put that in with the file here because we sent it out. So we started looking around the files. A couple of these were not there, and someone's like, I think I still have that at home. So they ran home and grabbed it. There's a coffee ring in the middle of the advertisement, but you know, that was kind of whoa. That was like, holy man, it was that specific session too. So whoever was looking out for us that day held on to that flyer to put into those court documents. But community planning is a valuable part, you know, looking ahead 5 years, 10 years, meeting with your community to see what they want developed so that you're just kind of not running willy-nilly. And you know, your community plan lining up with your budgeting exercises and whatnot, I think goes a long way.
I just want to quickly add while I remember it, the other aspect is Mark had asked earlier what we do with treaty staff. Do we get rid of them right away or not? And I said just the lawyers, but I do mean that we should keep the capacity we built in our staff. And in Tsawwassen, we designed it so that I had a Tsawwassen member partnered with an expert in the field, whether it be for natural resources, finance, or what have you, for all the tables we had. And I carried them over to be kind of in our new government and the departments that needed to worry about implementing those treaties, and that it would be really shame to build all that capacity in some of your people and then, you know, let somebody else benefit from that. So finding a way to integrate them into the organization was an important part of our strategy. It was just another comment I wanted.
Fantastic, Kim. Thank you. Larissa?
I had a couple of questions, but I just wanted to introduce myself to everyone who is online right now. I worked closely with the late Mel Bevan. So for about 6-7 years, I sat with him and Mark Stevenson, Gerald Wesley, Kitsum Kalem beside the late Don Roberts, Alex Bolton, all of our support staff we had. So I was at the negotiating table with Mel and the team for quite some time. I held the pen on the final agreement for 60 drafts beside Mel. So and I started out on the home visit team when we ratified the agreement in principle for Kitsillas and Calum, actually. So I guess my two questions, and thank you everyone for your presentations. It's so helpful. And I'll keep saying it. I think we should have TRMs for support groups for ratification and implementation, because it's a lot. And you know, just to know we're on the right track, and to have that paying forward culture that, you know, Mel always said that good information should always be free. Don't ever hold it back. You know, don't be stingy with it, because it's going to help other people to do to lessen the load on what they want to do, because we're all in the same, we're all fighting for the same thing. We're all working towards the same goal. And that's what brings us all together, you know, for these things. But my question is, when it comes to implementation, you know, we're telling people that our vote is on April 10th for Kitsillas. So we're ramping up. We've got our home visits going right now. So one question is about implementation. We're telling our members right now, it's going to take a few years. Like, it's not a light switch, you know, it's going to be an empty toolbox that we can fill ourselves. You know, we know what tools we need, so it's up to us. That's been really effective. I guess that few years in time, you know, it's not going to be a light switch if we get a yes, okay? But that few years that we have to get ready, what have you guys, what would you guys advise on what to say, other than it's going to take us a few years to get ready? Like, where can we start to help ease their nerves about how it's going to be? Because the agreement in principle was like, yes, we have this foundation for what we want to do. Now we're going to fill up the house and decide. Well, now we got the house filled up, but it's like, okay, what's really in it, and how are we going to do it? I'm still nervous about it, so I can relate, you know, and I'm pushing this thing. So that's my first question, is what can we begin to tell them, other than we have time to figure it out, right? So where do we start with that, the ideas of figuring it out? My second question is in regards to the home visit efforts. Being in the agreement in principle, and that it was the ticket. It was what got us the ratification. There was no way we could have done it without the home visit efforts. Can any of you tell me, give me any kind of numbers of how many, the ones who ratified, and, you know, I know you all did an amazing job. What was the percentage of the houses that you were able to get into and have home visits with? And how did that correlate with the ratification percentage of what you guys got in regards to 95%, 70%? How did those two correlate to successfully ratify your votes? Thank you.
As always, big questions, Clarissa. Looking forward to hearing from Kim and Clint on that. And just keep in mind too, Dylan and John are doing a panel this afternoon on exactly that as well. But this is a great time also to hear from Clint and Kim. So whichever one of you wants to go first. Looks like Roy might want to weigh in on that as well.
We never correlated the number of home visits to the vote turnout, although we do know that having safe spaces to explore controversial issues were important, so that people didn't feel targeted if they said something for or against an issue, and they could raise their concerns in a safe way. We did quite a few waves of home visits. It was integral to our strategy. We also set up our offland people the ability to have access, whether it be kind of group meetings, or they could set up appointments to meet with us. And we also tied it into our kind of eligibility and enrollment work, to track down all our people while we're at it, and getting people enrolled, and getting all their information. And because we had people in the US, a fair chunk of people, we had to be strategic about that as well. But I remember also calling people one by one on the list, just to make sure that they had all the information they needed, and making sure people could meet with people they were comfortable with too. We had some families that would rather set their hair on fire before meet with me. Do you know what I mean? So that they had someone from their own family that they could talk about their issues and concerns. So our ground game was very, very complex and very important and very responsive. And we needed our core team to be tight on the messaging and knowing the answers to some of those questions. I would say too, now you have the benefit in that treaties aren't final full settlements anymore. We get to benefit from new language in these new K treaties, I call them, in the 15-year or the periodic review provision under our treaty. We're underway with that process now. So the fact that governments have changed their views on these agreements and that they're living documents, living agreements, that guide our ongoing relationship. I think if we had had that back in the time, that would have taken some of the fear away. Some of the more offensive positions like tax exemption ending, that's no longer an issue. So I think though, never underestimate the lack of trust people have in federal and provincial government. And I think a lot of that underscores people's fear of moving forward, and people's fear of not knowing what to expect. A lot of people would like to have a perfect plan, knowing every aspect, knowing all the answers before we go down this path, which just isn't possible. I would end on a note with saying that kind of being transparent about the developmental work you have ahead and a plan for it and how long it might take. People are reasonable if they know we're going to work on our governance structures first, and this is how it's going to happen, and you'll have an opportunity for input. Those basic things are helpful, and ensuring you have ongoing ways to either in your new governance processes or other engagement activities to keep the people that want to be involved is important in my opinion. Anyways, I'll stop there.
Clint.
Sure. I guess touching on the first one, I think compiling a list of low-lying fruit that you may be able to make an announcement kind of leading up to effective date of what things will change. And even if you could connect some timeframes onto kind of the second batch of low-lying fruit, just kind of lay out some timeframes to kind of show things that are going to happen. Because one thing that we found in our community was somebody tripped in a pothole and said, "Oh, I was a goddamn treaty," and it's like somebody stuck a spoke in their bike tires and flipped their bike. And it's like, "Oh, that's damn treaty. Why the hell did I vote for treaty?" So I think just kind of looking back, maybe lessons learned and just kind of thinking, just to maybe have a couple of visuals to kind of show the very first kind of round of low lying fruit, second, third, and just so people know that how things will be implemented, that may kind of help with some grief down the road.
Great advice, Kim and Clint. Thank you very much. I might just add to that and we talk about in our community a lot, is that we're moving so fast in changing our worlds. And I mentioned earlier that, those who have been in the treaty process for longer and still negotiating have been doing a lot of preparation work there. I look at the difference between where communities are now versus where our community was when we were ratifying, and there's a huge difference. So I think it's a real lesson to sometimes just stop, turn around, look back at where you were 20 years ago versus where you are now, and the kind of capacity that you've built, that you're doing that as you're going along. And it's really important for people to see what's happening in the community already and the capacity that you've built. Clarissa?
Thank you, Angela. Just one comment in regards to the home visits. COVID obviously hit us all in some really incredible ways. I'm finding that it is a breath of fresh air after post Zoom culture that we can go and visit with the people again. They are just so appreciative. We've had people tell we've been waiting for this. We were waiting for this. So being able to knock on somebody's door again and stand there and talk after COVID is a huge advantage for us, because now you can sit and have tea with people again, and we haven't been able to do that. So that's just a something that I've noticed in these, that we can kind of take it back to the old school again and visit, you know, and it's just something that was taken away that now we can actually capitalize on that. So it is an advantage for us.
And the enthusiasm of people like yourself, Clarissa, always helps. And that's key. I think we heard that in a couple of presentations this morning. People love to see people who are excited about, moving forward. So any presentation that I've heard from any nation who's gone through ratification on anything has always said that it's the face-to-face visits, it's the personal touch that's going to reach people more than having a big gathering. There's a need for all of it, but people feel more connected and more safe, I think, when they can speak face-to-face. So thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Clint. Go ahead, Royce.
Yeah, just a short kind of input into the that window between a ratification and effective date and getting ready. At the point of ratification, if the treaty is ratified, there's a tripartite implementation group that gets assembled, and their role is to comb through the agreement and separate out all of the obligations set out in the treaty. So Canada will have a list of items that they're required to carry out. BC will have a list of items that they're required to carry out. And the nation will have a list of obligations that are required to carry out. So in our experience, what the outcome of that work is an implementation plan. It's a big spreadsheet itemizing a list of all the things that have to be carried out. There shall be carried out. There's a list of things that may be carried out. And it's basically a to-do list, a giant to-do list. So that becomes a very directional document, and it kind of gives all of the detail for what needs to happen before effective date. And some of the big items are lawmaking, like the nation shall make laws in a whole range of areas. And that's a time-consuming, hugely a big assignment of staff resources and financial resources to carry out. So there's a to-do list that gets developed tripartite. So it's not on the nation itself to do all of that work. And we can lean on the resources of the province and the resources of the feds to help lay out that work. So it's a very helpful document.
Thanks, Roy. That's a great input and a good reminder of something else that's there that helps you to approach things in a very orderly fashion. Appreciate that. Okay, once again, then, thank you very much to Kim and to Clint for always being available to help pay it forward and helping those that are following and joining our treaty family. So thanks so much for your presentations and your wise words as always. Appreciate it.